Right, so I'll try. I've a quick fiddle with my slides behind the screen. So again, apologies for missing the earlier sessions, but I have been watching, trying to log in frantically. So I want to talk about memory, feedback, and then share this piece of research which was published last June, which I guess is kind of like your go-to guide, so to speak. I don't know what it was for you, people who are, teachers. I know there'll be other people might watching from different fields and stuff, but it was probably one aspect of my teacher training when I started training to be a teacher in the early 90s that was lacking. I studied Vygotsky, Piaget, all the kind of great thinkers of the time, and we looked at psychology in the classroom and all aspects, but actually unpicking the brain and how we learn is probably one thing that was missing, and actually quite important that I know this stuff if I'm a teacher and I want kids to remember stuff. So I remember all through my teacher training, going to conferences, seeing psychologists on the stage start to talk about the brain. Thought, wow, this is interesting. So I guess the last 10 years I've been slowly unpicking and navigating my own way through all the research, and I guess through the kind of immersion of social media. We've all been sharing and spreading ideas much quicker, and we've been able to kind of cherry pick what we all need, which is going back to Mark's earlier point on CPD and does your school provide you what you need. So I'm going to share a little memory, then link it to feedback, and then I'll finish off with the research, and I'll try and do this in 20 minutes, so wish me luck. So learning, call it rehearsal, practice, rote learning, retrieval, call it what you want, but to make you remember something, you need to repeat it. So, I've been studying parts of the brain now, so I'd probably pitch myself between intermediate and advanced knowledge now on memory, to the point where I'm now learning probably parts of the brain, and I'm no scientist here, I'm just a teacher, but I'm looking at the myelin shaft, which is your super highway, which makes you do things. As I wave my hands on the screen, I'm doing gross motor movement, but then if I pinch the camera on the screen, it becomes a fine motor skill. I can do that also while I'm talking. So in your brain, broad rule of thumb, you have 100 billion neurons, which are small cells, and the more you repeat something, it develops a synapsis, which is a connection between the neurons, and you can form up to 100 trillion of these, and half of them, 50 billion, are stored in your cerebellum, which is right at the back of your head. Okay, so if you look at a little map of the brain, that's what's going on. As teachers, we quiz kids, we talk to them, we get feedback all the time, and we have to gauge what's going on in their long-term storage all the time. Teaching is exhausting. I would also argue it's incredibly complex and fascinating. So as teachers, we have to navigate this territory. And if we just say a 4-year-old, 16-year-old, a child at risk of exclusion, a vulnerable child, a different type of school setting to what you teach in, then you realise that the classroom's a very vast and broad space. If we understand how memory works, I think we can also unlock our potential as teachers. I do think it will make you a better teacher. So after today, just maybe reflect on where your position is and what else you need to know. I do think it will make you a better teacher. I also think for children, it shouldn't be left till GCSEs and A-levels. Kids need this stuff very early on. I would always go back to primary school. If we think about critical thinking, I did a session to a school in Vietnam this morning at 7 a.m. That was hard, but trying to do it on critical thinking, even harder. Trying to do it as a remote session on critical thinking, even tougher. So critical thinking, all those problem solving skills, analysis, synthesis, evaluation, how do we help kids develop this repertoire and know what to use as and when? It must be taught at an earlier age. And I think it's a social justice issue. In this term, Matthew effect, if I go to New York, I profit from that experience. If the teacher then talks about New York in the classroom and you haven't been to New York, you won't have as much cultural capital as I. So you can see the classroom is a difficult space because we can't necessarily fix all of society problems, although we try our best. So very simply, memory, 30 seconds. Think of it as a wardrobe. Think about your clothes, your black dress, your heels, your white shirt, your tuxedo. Where are they stored in your wardrobe? literally and metaphorically. Are they easy to find? That's a good analogy for memory. And I would say this book, published a couple of summers ago, is a really good first book published by Teacher Taylor. And it talks about mindset, relationships and memory and how they all interconnect. Teaching is a relationships-based profession. We've all been stuck behind computers, back into schools last week. Relationships with kids, happy faces, and all this kind of virtual parents, even they have a place, but we need to have that physical connection. We're human beings. We like social interactions, and I think as a teacher, I think it's critical that we hang on to that as much as we can. So memory, metaphor, the more things you hang up, where to find your tuxedo, the more you can retrieve this information and develop further schema. So an example, if I said Turkey, you're either thinking of the animal or the country. And if I'm a geography teacher, I need you to think about the topology, the people, the culture, the religion, the facts about the turkey, the country itself, not the actual animal. And if you're thinking of your Christmas dinner. So there is a good analogy. So here is a kind of basic map. Short-term memory. If I said the word phronesis, and I'll spell it for you, Phroneis. And this time, if you've got a pen to hand, I'd like you to write it down, and Mark, I might test you in a moment. Phronesis, Phronesis. That means professional wisdom. So the experienced cockpit pilot, the experienced. Phronesis means professional wisdom. You get better, you master, you become an expert in your field, the more wisdom that you have. So that's what phronesis means etymologically. That I've just put in your short-term memory. If I want to look at retrieval practice, work in memory, I can say to Mark, can you spell the word back to me? Can you say it out aloud? Can you say it backwards? The more times I give different instructions, I can either hinder or support your retrieval, and I can either keep repeating this over the sequence of a curriculum and a quick recap, phronesis, what does it mean, etc., etc., and I can start to unlock a kind of long-term storage and then later develop schema, which is long-term memory. So long-term memory are things like 2 + 2, the colours of the rainbow, where is Mount Vesuvius, you may or may not know, what's the third planet from the solar system, riding a bike, tying your shoelace, all these things are stored. The challenge is they're either subconscious stored or conscious. And the other fact that I need to probably present to you is you can only store between 4 and 9 pieces of information, depending on your ability and how often you rehearse, and manipulate it at once. So if I give you an example of at least 4 questions, how do you spell phronesis backwards? Where is Mount Vesuvius? What are the colours of the rainbow? And what's the 5th planet from the sun in the solar system? So already I'm starting to challenge your working memory. As teachers, the bottom left here, we're trying to develop concepts, rules and facts. So, and this waits to be of service, fingers crossed, and we hope it gets stored. And what we must do as teachers is to regularly retrieve. Now, cognitive scientists call it retrieval, that's the kind of cognitive term. Teachers, we call this revision, and we've been doing this for years. And if you do your digging into retrieval practice research, academically, it's been around for 130 years, so it's nothing new. We're not the first people to be talking about this. I guess we're becoming more immersed and accessed with this because we see a lot more research, we're connected through social media, and we want to become better teachers. The best definition of retrieval practice I can give you is always insist on writing it down or saying it out aloud. Because if I say, can you think of the 5th planet from the solar system? Well, I don't know if you are. So as a teacher, I need to make sure that's concrete. Right, kids, write it down. So think, pair, share. What's the 5th planet? Think. Pair up with a partner. Discuss, write it down, show me in the whiteboard. And when you do, this becomes procedural knowledge. This is the right-hand side of the screen. You turn the concept rule of fact into an action, a goal, the answer. Okay, so bottom left is declarative knowledge stored, bottom right, procedural knowledge. The next thing I want to kind of share with you is, I guess, 2 keywords there, the orange, so the yellow and red boxes at the bottom, episodic and semantic. The differences are episodic. You're the star of the show. It's when you can recollect your 18th birthday, if you can remember that far, your first car, your first job, your first relationship, your first mortgage, all these different things. Episodic is a personal event. The danger with episodic is it fades and becomes more unreliable over time. And we know that we lose brain cells after a certain age, and they can also be reproduced with practice. But episodic, the personal memory is a good example there. Semantic, concepts, rules and facts. How tall is the Statue of Liberty? What material is it made from? When was it erected? So it's important to know the differences and the kind of the challenges with knowing different types. We then add into the mix schema. Now, if you look on the left-hand side here, environment, the child's home, your classroom, your corridor, your department, your team, whether you're a noisy classroom, such as my environment, a design and technology classroom, banging hammers and machines on, it's going to impact on memory. And if you have ADHD, dyspraxia, or you're super talented in a subject, we all suffer from cognitive load. Doesn't matter how old you are or what an expert you are. So think of yourself as a cognitive coach now. You've got a little bucket at the front of your head. Some of you got big buckets, some of you got small buckets, and all the buckets can be full with lots of different information. So if I start to slow down a little bit, because I'm conscious of time and trying to give you the key facts, I make sure that key content sticks rather than skipping through everything. And hopefully, rather than the content being missed, it starts to stick with you. So that's the left-hand side. Paying attention, a broad rule of thumb. If you take a child's age and add 2, that's generally they're paying attention. Knowing a lot more about memory, adults, about 25 to 30 minutes before we start to suffer from cognitive load. So I was in my son's governor's meeting the other night. Great experience. I love being a governor. But 2.5 hours at the end of a working day, we need to build in breaks. So a great Teach Meet model like this that Mark's organised, lots of different voices, lots of different opportunities, lots of data, helps us manage our working memory. If you look on the right hand side now, we've got this encode, getting information into kids' heads, or in this case yours virtually. How do we make it stick? So we tell interesting stories. I make an interesting provocation. Just because you mark all your books doesn't make you a great teacher. And I try to make things stick. Retrieval, I remember, and a recap. What was that word I just taught you when we started this session? It began with the letter P. What does it mean? And can you spell it backwards? So there's 3 questions. So a quick recap: phronesis, professional wisdom, and if we want to spell it backwards, we could have a little bit of fun. So encode, store, retrieve, there's your great model for curriculum and lesson plan delivery to transfer knowledge from near to far long-term storage. I mentioned the word turkey earlier. I don't want to think of the animal, I want to think of the country. As a teacher, I need to shape the correct schema. Why? Because it might be influenced by the news, fake social media, bias, stereotype, etc., etc. So there's your little recap, folks. Explicit, implicit, declarative, procedural knowledge, your concepts, rules and facts, semantic and episodic. And if I just give you one real life example, there I am on top of the Twin Towers. So episodic, personal event. I know when I did this, 1997. I know it was the summer, but now I've forgotten what month it was because it was 1997, a long time ago. June, July, August, September, I'm going to assume. So episodic, I know that I went up the Twin Towers. There's the photo also to help my memory recall, but I can't remember the month. Compared to semantic memory, how tall is the Twin Towers? Was it the North or South Tower? I also remember my ears popping as we went up the lift. But lots of other data has been lost. So as teachers, it's important to, yes, we bring in real world experiences, episodic experiences, but sometimes we always need to know the differences between semantic and episodic. So I'm just going to pause. Mark, is there any questions in the chat box so far?
There's not yet, Ross, but we're always sort of 30 seconds behind, so
right.
They may
okay. All right, well, I'll just pause. So what I've researched throughout lockdown, everyone, is regular pauses, particularly in a virtual world. They work well in the classroom, gives us time to process. They work virtually well. So I've been putting this slide in all my presentations and just spending 30 seconds just to slow down, just to give people a chance to catch up on what's been said. Okay, so I'm just going to move on. Mark can pause me if there's any questions that pop through. Effective feedback loop. So this is a piece of research I published in Mark Plan Teach. I tried to simplify the theory. I'm just going to show you the theory, whiz through lots of kind of practical strategies and just talk about the 7 principles here. The most effective teachers, I said all, but not all do, sadly, but the most effective regularly model. Number 1. Here's what a good one looks like. Blue Peter teaching, I call it. I do it first, watch me, so I'll do the drawing or the equation. Let's do it together. I'll think out aloud and you can spot my mistakes on the board. Now you do it and I will come around and monitor misconceptions. And then what the teacher does once this modeling started is 2, 3, 4 and 5 on the screen. You can almost chunk this together. Hands up, think, pair, share, show me whiteboards. Get a bit of discussion going in the classroom. Well done, Ross. And I either make your piece of work feel incredible or not yet incredible. And that's that number 5, that motivation. Where all teachers spend all their time, energy and efforts is number 6, plugging in the interventions, scaffolding resources. I'll add in that difficult term, differentiation. And then we start to fade the resources as children develop expertise. And this is where we start to think about self-regulation, where kids become experts and they develop a degree of metacognition. I'm aware of Mount Vesuvius. I know it's in Naples, Pompeii, Italy, but I don't yet know when it last erupted. And if I knew that, that's that metacognition in a simple example. So what the teacher does, number 7, I use this data as a feedback loop in the moment to work out what to do next. And this is challenging when I've got 60 minutes, there's another lesson, I've got loads of deadlines going on behind the scenes. I've got 30 kids in front of me, all at different points, and I've got to try and work out what's in their memory and use this to work out what to do in the moment, and also behind the scenes for next lesson. So if we just show you the theory, and I'm going to skip loads of ideas and I'll finish with this research. Number 1 on the board here. I say, right, draw me a picture of a volcano, label the key parts of the mountain, and let's write the first paragraph. What happens when the volcano erupts and the lava, what happens when it cools down and falls down the hill? Number 1. Inside this grey zone, folks, is everything that's hidden, that we don't see. There will be some things that we can pick up over an academic year when we get to know kids' relationships. We'll start to know their cultural capital, their domain knowledge, their strategies. What are they like on a Monday morning, Friday afternoon, etc. What are their motivations? Does it what I say, or incentives or reward points, or dare I say that bar of chocolate or an apple, going to motivate them? What I say and when also is going to make a difference. So that's going to impact on 2, 3, 4 and 5, the students' goals, their internal motivations, their own critical thinking skills, and then they're going to reference their own outcomes based on all those processes and what Mr. McGill said. And at the bottom of that grey box, you'll see I can observe cognitive signals, non-verbal signals, and behaviour and attention and engagement, etc., etc. So that's 6 at the bottom, and then 7, that's that feedback loop. And this could be, all of this could be in a microsecond as well as over an academic year. So you can start to see the classroom is a very complex and very fascinating space. And if we want to try and evaluate it reliably, here lies the challenge for all school leaders. So what I'm going to do very quickly, folks, I'm going to skim through lots of ideas to support these 7 principles. So there they are. If I'm just going to go and whiz through them, there's the modelling. I'm a big fan of visualisers, been doing these for 15 years, webinars for 10. I do, we do, you do. Whether I don't have a visualizer, I model on the board, or I do the triple jump, or I conduct the science experiment. It's really important to model. And then what we do is we introduce or take away the different resources as children develop expertise. Idea 2, that self-assessment. you'll do a million of these and more than what's just on the screen. I guess the critical one I will give you is the Retrieval Practice Map. It's a great methodology. Last month, we talked about Mount Vesuvius. Last week, we talked about lava. Last lesson, it was this. Today's key question or keyword is X, and we could do this virtually together to swap the paper around, or we could stop the lesson every 5 minutes. Okay, retrieval, I know to write it down or say it out aloud is enough for long-term storage, because if I say think about the mountain Vesuvius, I don't know if you are, so we need to make sure that it's concrete. Write it or say it would be the top tip. Idea 3, whizzing on very quickly. Teachers have to have a wide range of questioning strategies. It's not the number of questions you ask, it's the range and the type. So there's a whole list there. I guess my favourite one is Fermi questions. How many? Enrico Fermi was a Nobel Peace Prize winner, worked in the field of statistics, and he posed limited questions to elicit creative responses. I guess if we were all together in a classroom, you know, a standard maths classroom, and I said, how many balloons would it take to fill this classroom? Straight away, the discussion lights up. I get some breathing space, so it's great for teacher workload. And all the kids are suddenly thinking, well, how big are the balloons? Or it's 12,000 balloons. Or I come back to the discussion and say, right, kids, it's a hot air balloon or a water balloon. So it's a really great technique. There's hundreds of examples on my website if you type Fermi questions. Whole class feedback sheets. Why do we assume written feedback is the best form when we know assessment means etymologically to sit beside? So if I've got 30 books and I have a look through them, I annotate the sheet. COVID world, post-COVID, I sit beside the children and I give them verbal feedback. And Hattie published an update to his visible learning last June, and I had a good chat with him actually about it. And he said that visible learning, these effect sizes, some of the studies were duplicated. So he clarified the feedback research again. And if you're familiar with this, it's 0.73 impact on outcomes. And again, be cautious with all this. But, you know, what type of feedback? You know, in a maths lesson, DT, art is going to be very different. So you've got feed up, feed back, feed forward, and in italics there, you've got the definitions. Again, we have written, verbal or non-verbal. I tap my wrist and I say, hurry up, Ross, we're nearly out of time. So there's lots of ways we can provide kids with feedback. Moving on very quickly to a fourth one, a great little mantra I've been using for 20 odd years, MINT, materials, in or out of seats, noise level and time. And this is probably a great way to be conscious of working memory. You'll need a piece of paper, a pen, move out your seats, look at the displays, quiet conversations, 5 minutes, off you go. And then I monitor questions around the class, low level behaviour, etc, etc. Moving swiftly on, I'm going to skip this one onto 5. Feedback. Where does your feedback sit? Ross, great presentation, too quick. It's a shame you did X, Y, Z. Well, there's a criticism. It's not going to improve my performance. Sometimes I'll need a piece of advice if I'm new to the job. We all like a bit of a compliment, it's good for our ego, but I really need to improve. So the suggestion, have you thought about X? What would happen if you tried A instead of B? It's going to help me develop that self-regulation and metacognition better. So think about how you frame your feedback. I'm going to whistle on a couple of slides to interventions. You can't do everything. What's your methodology for choosing your scaffold resources, your differentiation techniques? And I guess at a leadership team level, how do you evaluate all those different interventions? So I'm going to send you all these slides, everyone. Don't worry about missing out on some ideas you might not have seen before. And then here's a key piece of research conducted with UCL September 2019. The verbal feedback report. You can speak to kids. It does raise their attainment. You don't necessarily have to write it down, is the message. And there is a small piece of academic research to back it up. Okay, I'm just going to pause again. Mark, any questions in the chat box?
No questions in the chat box, Ross, but I'm interested a little bit in, I know you mentioned technology earlier, but how you might foresee technology supporting particularly the feedback loop.
Yeah, well, that's a good one. So there's been a lot of people doing, using Mote, or I'm a big fan of Kaizena, so I can leave a verbal note, or I saw some of the technology you were using in your presentation earlier. We like that voice, we like that little video. Whenever I work with teachers or schools or kids for a long time, providing a little video annotation of how I marked their work, replaying it back in class. And that technology is really essential for feedback. And again, some kids love the computer, some kids love that physical interaction. So I'll go back to my kind of key thing: written, verbal, non-verbal, feedback, feed up, feed forward. It's important to specify the type, and we know that technology can support it. I'm going to coin the great phrase from Bananarama. Some of you will be old enough to remember the band. It's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. That's what gets results. Right, 4 minutes to go on my clock here. So I'm just going to finish with a couple of key concepts and then this research. Retrieval practice. We know it's the number one thing. Revision, rehearsal, rote learning, call it what you want. If you want kids to remember stuff, including ourselves, we have to repeat. If I just signpost number 9 there, recovery, curriculum, learning lost. Fingers crossed we've been talking to kids, building relationships again, getting back into routines, and then recapping on where we were 1 year ago before we went into lockdown. There's your 10 benefits. There's a great piece of research in the bottom right there, powerful teaching. Got a huge body of these resources on my website if you're interested, but you'll be doing all of these things already. It's important to select the type of retrieval practice exercise to match the activity, the time in the year, the age group, and your subject. And then you again start to get into the details of that. Teaching is a very complex place to work. There's the feedback 7 principles as a lesson planning sheet. So I just thought I'd signpost that in case you fancy planning lessons in a different way. And I'm going to signpost desirable difficulties. I'm not going to play this now, but Robert Bjork research in 1992. In order to support long-term retention, learning should be hard. And it's really, really important that we make, multiple choice questions. We don't give easy options. What is the sun? Is it a chocolate bar? Is it a rock? Is it a star? Well, the chocolate bar is too easy to eliminate, so it doesn't make learning hard. So think about how you pose questions in class. Evidence-informed strategies. Well, again, you've got your kind of key ones there, color-coded, 8 and 9. I'd probably add in interleaving. We know that we have to mix topics. I'd probably add in feedback as an 11th here as a kind of key strategies that are going to make a difference to your classroom. And again, the ones that have the most impact is 8 and 9 compared to all the others. So to finish, folks, this piece of research, this was published in June. I was lucky enough to peer review it before it was published. It's about 70 pages, so I don't suspect everyone's had a little look at it. But I wrote a couple of blogs, so if you're interested, I've got a kind of 3 or 4 minute summary. What the research essentially unpicked was, as teachers, we try to understand our curriculum, become the subject expert. We create a calm environment where kids can learn. We then manage this behaviour and the learning. And then we have to present the material and help unlock the self-regulation, this metacognition. So on the screen here, I've just got a few highlights here also, but if you look at row 1, 2 and 3, this is where all new teachers spend all their energy trying to master in their first few years in the classroom. Experienced teachers watching, much of this becomes your phronesis, remember, professional wisdom. In some respects, it becomes subconscious, automatic pilot. I know my curriculum inside out. I can control my classroom. Kids don't muck about. I can manage behaviour. I have the occasional glitch, etc. That's those top 3 rows. Where all teachers spend all their efforts, regardless of how long you've been in the profession, is number 4. I have the structure, the curriculum into bite-sized chunks. Deal with pandemics, deal with assemblies, deal with short lessons, different timetable changes, etc. Explain complicated concepts to kids 4-year-old or 16-year-olds and kids that have missed last lesson. Pose lots of questions to 30 kids and evaluate where they are all at any moment. Interact with them, provide that feedback, help embed their knowledge through retrieval, and then activate it so they can regulate it themselves. I think all teachers watching this particularly experienced teachers, that's where your efforts are. Okay, and I think it's a great, maybe a CPD mechanism, and maybe these 17 statements on the screen, maybe a good kind of little 360 evaluation or a kind of CPD tool to see where you are in terms of your own professional practice. So at the back of the slides, everyone, just to kind of finish off, I'll just kind of signpost these to finish. There's lots of stuff here. There's your great curriculum model. Get kids, identify what's got to get into kids' heads to develop schema, help make it stick, tell stories, stand on the table if you have to, play videos, whatever it is, and regularly recap. 30 seconds. What is the third planet in the solar system? How do you spell phronesis? And it just has to be a quick little quiz throughout the lesson. And then you've got it as a curriculum model. So you've got 4 silly questions from me on the left-hand side. One of them is a curriculum question. The others are quite random. Encode, store, retrieve. You can look at your old kind of curriculum models. Think about how you might transfer knowledge from the top left near to far, what it's going to look like in July or in a year's time. Obviously physical with COVID, can't do that at the moment, but you've still got the home environment as a factor. Think about different locations, different time of days. Task and format helps develop schema. And as a little test, I went back to an old schema work. So there's an old schema work I wrote in 2004, developing bridges and towers, what you would do as a year 7 project in design technology. And I thought, right, encode, store, retrieve, how can I tweak this work that I've already done, where all the thinking's done? Obviously curriculum's evolved to a degree. And I thought, right, where would be the key key knowledge that needs to be stuck? What needs to be taught explicitly, and what retrieval exercises would I build in? We can see the map changes there and where I've identified those small tweaks. So I think with this cognitive science immersion to inform a curriculum is a really good thing. And I don't think it's too difficult to change it the way you teach. Managing behaviour, NQTs watching newer teachers to profession. We all need to build a behaviour ethos for kids returning to school. All these things are going to reference to the toolkit that I've just showed you. And all of us, if it's any consolidation, I still struggle with behaviour in my 25th year of teaching. And think about behaviour sanctions in line with your whole school policy. And do all your teachers row the boat in the same direction and are consistent? So I think I'm going to leave it there, Mark. There's loads more in there. I'm just very conscious of time, but I've kind of built resources to suit those 17 principles all here. And I'll ping them all through to you, but that's them all on the screen. And I guess if you've not read the research, it's probably a good thing to have a look at maybe over the Easter or summer break or back at school in your CPD sessions. Maybe tackle a key kind of components in each of the CPD sessions. So I hope that helps everyone. If I just pop back to this, is the key thing I really want you to take away, is just developing your kind of concept on memory to help maybe influence the way that you teach. So thank you, and apologies again for all the technical glitches earlier in the session.
Thanks, Ross. I'm just going to put myself on the screen for a moment as well there. So I want to apologise to you actually, Ross, because we didn't get to do a proper introduction for you. And I had an introduction all ready to go. And of course, because of those technical problems, we didn't get to do that. So I think it's important that those watching from outside of PolyMAT know that we've been working with you over the last year. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we have done, because we value the work that you're doing, is we actually got a copy of your new book, Mark Plan Teach 2, for every member of staff across the trust, every member of teaching staff, I should say. And we've got little book clubs running. We've got they're looking at a chapter each week. Using it to inform CPD sessions. So we're obviously a big fan of you, but I also wanted to give you an opportunity, because I know you've got a number of events coming up yourself, which people can sign up.
Yeah, all virtual. Thank you, Mark. All virtual. I mean, I had my first vaccination today, so as I queued up waiting for the jab, there's a kind of glimmer of hope, I suppose, that we're all going to get back to some form of normality. And I know, Mark, we've adapted all our kind of plans. I was supposed to be physically throughout the last year, So we've adapted online, but if you're interested, folks, my Twitter page, I suppose, is where I put out my thoughts most often, but Eventbrite or on my website, teachertoolkit.co.uk, or email me, support@teachertoolkit.co.uk if you want some research-informed practical ideas which kind of cut out the nonsense, which is what I'm really passionate about. You know, I want high standards, but we need to give simple plug and play ideas for teachers who work in very difficult environments, easy to access resources. So that's what I'm trying to do. Thank you, Mark.
That's all right, no problem, no problem. And of course, for PolyMAT staff, we do have booked in Ross coming to see us in person, hopefully, fingers crossed, in July. So yeah. In that last week of term, we've got Ross coming in to talk to us for half a day inset, and that was what we were supposed to have right at the beginning of this year, back in September. But we're really looking forward to it.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone, and hope you've had a good evening. And yeah, I'll see you again physically. Let's pray.